Hi everyone, my name is Glenn Feldstein with Glenn and Brittany Real Estate and Engel Völkers Vancouver. Joining me in this video is Andrew Carros, the Chief Operating Officer of Engel Völkers Vancouver. In this video, we discuss all the legislative changes to our real estate market. Some are already in effect and others start in 2023. I've timestamped each topic so you can bounce around a bit, but we do encourage you to watch it all. Maybe not all in one sitting, but watch it all. Starting in BC, we talk about no rental restrictions. This is already in effect. No age restrictions already in effect, and also the home buyer rescission period starting in January of 2023. Moving to the federal level, we have the foreign buyer ban, anti-flipping tax, and we finish off talking about the market. If you find this video helpful, please give us a like, and if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks a lot, and hope you enjoy. Okay, so hey everyone, I've got Andrew Carros here with me today, and Andrew Carros is about 20 years in the real estate business, and he is the Chief Operating Officer at Engel Völkers here in Vancouver. He comes with a wealth of knowledge, and I wanted to have him on to get his perspective. He's definitely an advocate for our industry, and somebody whose opinion I definitely value. So what we want to talk about today is all the changes, the legislative changes coming in 2023 and how that's going to impact the market. And of course, touch on some of the changes we've already experienced. So Andrew, thanks for spending some time, especially now that we're really into the holidays here, to come on and do this with me. And I thought maybe we'll start with the provincial changes.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
then we'll move into sort of the federal, right?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Yeah. So the biggest one, provincially, that was just passed, a bill was passed November 24th, no rental restrictions. So basically what this is, strata corporations across BC will no longer be able to enforce any bylaw that prohibits rentals. Now, of course, there are some exceptions, being short-term, less than 30 days, Airbnb, nightly vacation rentals, and that sort of thing. So, Andrew, what do you think about that?
Well, let's start by just letting people know kind of how this came about. John Horgan, who was our premier, he had to step down, unfortunately, for health concerns, and David Eby took over his seat as premier. David Eby has always been a really strong advocate for affordability, and he has a background with the housing department in British Columbia. And so I actually do respect that he is trying his best to try to make sure that we're creating homes that people can live in. I mean, and that's the whole idea here. And so the whole kind of concept is great, in my opinion. Maybe not for some people who live in buildings that are rental restricted right now, and they're worried about what that might mean for their building or how they can control their building. But the idea here is we need supply. I think that's our biggest problem in the industry. We're going to discuss a lot of different things today, and all of those topics, all the legislation, everything is geared towards affordability. And it's all geared towards people trying to have a house to live in that they feel secure with and they feel protected with. And so David Eby came out with a very quick announcement. One of the faults to it, I think, is that these things come out so quickly and then we all have to react and we don't really understand exactly how this is going to be done. So best to my knowledge. Okay, so we always have to preface everything, Glenn, by saying that if anybody is listening to this, has any specific questions, we do have to acknowledge that they need to seek legal advice, okay? That's just the disclaimer we're going to lay over this whole thing here. Generally, though, what this means is that it is an immediate mandate that all buildings in the province that have current rental restrictions, notwithstanding the short-term rentals of no Airbnb or less than 30 days, they will no longer be allowed to say you can't rent your unit out if that's what you intend to do. What is going to be the result of that is going to be hopefully a lot more rental units coming into the marketplace, which should help soften the demand, create more supply, and the idea would be to create more affordability. I kind of agree with Mr. Eby on this one. More product means potentially a better marketplace to get better affordability, and that's great. It also opens up the idea if somebody bought in a building that had a rental restriction they've now growing with a family, they can now move on and buy something else or go and rent something else, and then perhaps rent their investment out without having to unload it. And I think that's important as well, because this is real estate. We have to remember is people's greatest investment, not necessarily just where they live, but it's also a financial investment that they have. And so allowing people to kind of have a little bit more flexibility with their investment without having to put it on the market and sell it, I think is a really positive a decision, to be honest. What I don't like is how quickly it's come out. And so what's going to happen here is that the province has given all stratas, so we have to have an official vote to change bylaws. Now, they don't really have a choice on what those bylaws will be, for the exception of short-term rentals. And there is you're still allowed to have age restrictions in a building of 55 plus. So what they're trying to do is protect senior living circumstances, which again, I think is positive. I think we're going to need a lot more senior living over the years. So maybe this transfers buildings to become, 55 plus instead of just a regular building, which will give seniors maybe more possibility of having housing that they feel supported with. So at the end of the day, bottom line is that great. I think this legislation is actually quite smart. I think a lot of stratas are going to be upset by it. I think a lot of stratas are still yet to be determined on how they're going to deal with it. But they have 4 to 5 months to have an AGM or a special general meeting, an SGM. AGM is annual general meeting, in order to officially vote in a new bylaw. But the immediacy of this legislation is right now, according to the government. So if you have a property, let's just hypothetically say you're trying to rent it out, you've applied to your strata for hardship, you can go ahead and rent that unit out now.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with you too. I think it's a good thing. And I think that people have a tendency, myself included maybe, but have a tendency to always look at like the worst case scenario. So I think for those where it's good, I mean, most of the people that I work with are end users, right? Like 80% of the people I work with, end users, then we've got some investors as well. But a lot of those end users, they are looking for flexibility, whether they exercise the right or not. But they're like, hey, Glenn, I'm going to live here, but, down the road, I'd like to probably keep it and rent it out. So I would like to have a building that's flexible on rental restrictions, right? And whether they do or don't, I mean, that's a whole nother story. I mean, most of them don't, because typically they're graduating to a more expensive property and they need the equity, right? And, they might not be able to hold one and still buy the other. So I think it's really great in that respect. And then the people that I'm feeling a little bit for, the ones that bought into a building that didn't allow rentals for a reason. And I think that those are the people that are maybe looking at this like a little bit too doom and gloom. Like their building is not going to turn into a rental building, because the majority of people who purchased in that building were of that same mindset. Now, there are some people that said, you know what, I love this place. It's okay that it doesn't allow rentals. I prefer if it did, but I love this place. So maybe you get a couple neighbors that end up renting their place, or when somebody sells, maybe you get an investor that buys in, but your building's not going to turn into a rental building. I was recently speaking with a property manager too, who was very, very upset by this, because one of the buildings that she manages, or the stratas that she manages, most of the problems are surrounded by tenants. So, and I was a tenant, I looked after my place, right? I'm sure you were at one day, but yeah, I think some tenants and renters, they get a bad rap. But ultimately, I don't think if your building didn't allow rentals and now you can rent, it's not going to turn into a rental building. So I don't think, I still think it's a good thing. And then there's the whole other, thought about value as well. Now, some people don't really care about this, but if your building didn't allow rentals and now you could see a spike in value. And that's not important to everybody, but it is a positive. And conversely, maybe some of the buildings that did allow rentals, maybe because people have more options now, maybe theirs drop a little bit. But I mean, it's to measure that would be nearly impossible. But there are some amazing areas where it was tough to find properties that you could rent, which now you can rent. So ultimately, I think it's a good thing. But at the end of the day, I think the market's mostly driven by end users, right?
Yeah,
So,
the one thing we should sort of maybe state is, why do buildings have rental restrictions at all? Like, why were people putting building restrictions at all? And why should they be scared? Let's talk to their side of the story for a second. I understand, at the end of the day, I agree, most buildings aren't going to turn into these huge rental buildings. Absolutely. Everybody still needs a place to live. And most people are going to be moving up and selling their properties. But the next owner can have a tenant in there. And the problem is, and this is what the stratas are worried about, is that the tenant's rights, as well as they should be, are very strong and lean very heavily towards the tenant. And so I think most buildings fear when they have a rental restriction. The reason they have a rental restriction is because it becomes really difficult to deal with a tenant, more so than dealing with an owner if there's a problem. And of course,
right.
all owners are responsible for their tenants' actions, but sometimes the owners can't react to a problem with the tenant that is happening in the building because they don't have the rights to do something about it. Then the building is now fining the owner. It just becomes a big mess.
Right.
And so if you're not kind of ready for it, it can cause other issues that people don't really think about. And I agree with you. As a renter, I took care of everything that I've ever, when you rent a car, you usually take care of it, right? But the truth is, when you rent a car and you're driving down that gravel road, you're not quite as concerned about the undercarriage as you would be if it was your own car. And so that's the feeling that most owners have. And so people who are protective of their ownership of their properties, and they want to know who's coming in and out of the building, they don't want constant turnover. They are, security reasons. There's a whole bunch of reasons that come in. And so there's a lot of conversation about how stratas might try to change their bylaws to sort of protect against who can be a tenant, but then you got human rights issues. So I think there's a lot to be kind of that are going to come out of this, and we're going to find out in the next 4 or 5 months when these votes and these meetings are happening, to all the issues that people bring forward, because everybody's got a different opinion, everybody's got a different mandate, everybody's dealing with their own personal situation. We have to have empathy for all people. And unfortunately, this is going to drive some people to not be happy with what the result is going to be. At the end of the day, it's just up to the stratas to make sure that they're monitoring their building well, and maybe put some provisions in place to help with security and screening of tenants. That's probably the best idea.
Right. Yeah. I agree.
But good idea, I think. I still think it's a good idea. I think
it's a good idea too. And I think it's
more inventory,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's, and it does help out renters. I mean, it's still a bit of, from my understanding, it's still a bit of a dogfight out there. Like what people are experiencing purchasing, say 6 to 18 months ago, like renters have been experiencing that too, right? So ultimately, I do think it's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, I do think it's a good thing because, people who buy into a strata, you have to understand you're buying into a community, okay? But ultimately, you're also buying that property, so it's nice to be able to have some flexibility with your investment, right?
I agree.
So ultimately, how do you think it's going to impact the market from like a value perspective? And maybe this one, because it's dealing with rentals, is a bit of a tough question to ask. But whenever there's a new change, I'm always curious to say, like, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, what impact is this going to have on the market or on people? Personally, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, all legislation that we're dealing with right now is all geared towards protecting the consumer and trying to help with affordability. So let's just figure that out. Are we protecting the consumer in this one? Not a ton necessarily, because there's going to be a lot of people who have already got properties that aren't going to be too happy about this. But at the end of the day, as far as affordability goes, I think rentals are the place to go to try to actually create real affordability. I mean, even if we brought prices down in areas like Vancouver, it's still not affordable to most people, right? And so rentals are the way to make sure that people have good homes to live in, and this should create more supply, or at least more ability to have supply. And if that's the result, that should be supply and demand and absorption rates and all that sort of stuff. We should end up with more supply. Therefore, it should curb the pricing a little bit, should create more affordability. That is the idea. I would have to say I agree with this one as far as a policy. The only thing I would have liked is maybe a little bit more warning, and so that we could, the one thing that we're noticing with the government right now is that they're not coming to the industry and industry leaders. We've got some amazing industry leaders right now who are really caring and really want to do this right. And we all want to start making things better for everybody, real estate agents included. And at the end of the day, we're just not getting the information we need, and the policies aren't detailed enough for us to really have the answers. Consumers are coming to us asking us for the answers, and we have to say, go get legal advice like I just did at the beginning of this call. That is really confusing sort of messaging from our government as far as trying to protect us when it's kind of still a lot of unknowns and how quickly they're making these decisions. Not that I disagree with the decision. It's just that I think we could have said, when he came in, he probably should have said, this is what I'm going to do. Stratus can have a meeting, then we're going to have a consultation in March, and then in March we're going to make a final decision or something to that effect. It can still happen quickly. It just doesn't have to happen immediately. Anyway.
Yeah, this one was immediate.
Well, a few of them did. A few of them. This one was immediate.
Yeah. And then, so then, tied into this same bill that you already touched on too was age restrictions. So for those of you not aware, we've got 55 plus, but we also had 19 plus, right? So
we have lots of pluses. There's 45 pluses too.
Yeah, that's right.
We see them all the time.
Yeah, I even heard one strata that was 45 plus. They just amended or vote to just make it 55 then, right? And then of course everyone's grandfathered in, right? The 19 plus, doing away with that, I think that's I think that's a positive as well. Again, I can understand the people who are for that restriction, but a couple as a child and so on and so forth, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyways, I like that one. I like that one as well. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any problem. I think nor do you about the ideas behind this legislation. And I think that this is the first time that I actually could see a potential positive impact from this. And I think we've said it all, more flexibility for buyers. Maybe it creates more market place for people. It could raise prices in some buildings. You're not wrong about that, but more supply generally and more buildings that everybody can purchase in for rent investment, that might kind of sway it out and sort of balance it out a little bit.
I think it'll balance out too.
Yeah, so I'm not too worried about this one.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move along to the next one that is on the provincial level. So the home buyer rescission period, also known as a cooling off period. So what this is, as of January 3rd, 2023, a buyer who makes an offer on a property, reaches an agreement with the seller, has a mandatory 3 business day rescission period. Now, this isn't a foreign concept to us, of course, because with pre-sales who, they're under the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, they already have a 7-day rescission period built into this. But this, again, some of these things, might have helped in the past a little bit. But where this does have some value would be in competing situations when emotions are high and things get a little bit wild. And unfortunately, when we're handling multiple offers, you don't know where the next offer is and that sort of thing, right? So I can see it being of some value there. What do you think about it? It's just
Let's just define rescission for a second. Basically, what this means is, and how the policy is written, is that if I was in an offer and I got it accepted, I would now, as a buyer, have 3 business days, as you said, to basically back out of the deal. That's what they mean by rescission, okay? There is going to be a penalty of 0.25% of the purchase price. That would mean, $2,500 on $1 million. That would be given to the seller to compensate them for what this means to them. But in all honesty, as we know as realtors, they are absolutely halting the sale of this property and then giving a buyer the ability to just back away. And what I haven't truly figured out is what the protection is there. They call it the homeowner's protection or homeowner's buyer's rescission period is meant to be a protection to consumers. And I don't see how this is protecting consumers. So a good realtor in the past, when they're going into multiple offers, will do due diligence prior to writing an offer. So we can talk to the banks, we can talk to lawyers, we can talk to inspectors, we can have inspections done. We can do all this prior to an offer presentation. And one of the reasons that came out to why they put this out there is they said that it was unfair that buyers had to invest in the process prior to knowing if they got the property. Well, buying a property, it costs money and you got to take risks. But if you shouldn't have to take a risk. You can do the business beforehand and you can get it all ready. And so good realtors used to prepare their clients, even at the beginning of a buying process. You might have to do 3 or 4 inspections prior to getting the property that you want. It's about preparation. It's about client expectations. It's about making sure that your buyer understands the process that we're getting into. And unfortunately, there's other people that have come into the marketplace and they write offers without doing the due diligence, and they do put their clients at risk, or the clients choose to take risk. I shouldn't say that the agent's the one doing that. I would say that the client ends up taking a risk because you're in multiple offers, and people want to have no conditions. They want to have a big deposit up front, and they want the property sold. Well, if a realtor does the good job at selling that property and getting multiple offers on that property and providing the correct information and correct access to the house, then there shouldn't be any risk being taken by the purchaser at that time. And the idea that you can't have subjects, well, I've had subjects on properties and been in multiple offers, and I've just made them short. I pre-arrange my inspection for the day after it gets accepted, or I know that we need to get an appraisal. So I explain to the seller, and I say, we just need an appraisal to finish off this file, but I can't go no subject. But, you know, they see that I'm a professional, that I'm doing a good job. They see the intent of my buyers, and maybe they'll grant me that subject. I don't know why we need to have a period of time where people can just back away. And the problem is how do we collect the fee? And that's the other sort of sloppy part of the legislation, is that they're saying that unless we have a deposit as a real estate brokerage, we can't just give that fee to somebody because we don't have any money to give the fee. So of course, people are going to ask the realtor to go after that fee, but it's not our job to. We're going to have to tell them to get legal advice, turn it into a legal situation, and they're going to be wasting more money. So we're trying to save people money, yet we're costing them money and costing the sellers the risk of not knowing what is going to happen next. I also just want to point out that you put the 7-day rescission period for new homes, like from developers. That I get. We used to have these huge lineups of people come into these, showrooms. It was impossible to read a 300-page disclosure statement in the time of making the purchase, which you're supposed to be disclosed prior to writing a contract. That's the rule. And so they threw in the 7-day rescission because of the chaos that was happening in a heated market. Again, we're always dealing with policies and rules that are coming out of heated markets. In Vancouver, we are used to heated markets. We've been in this Glenn, you and I have been in this for about the same amount of time. And we've dealt with nothing but heated markets in Vancouver. It goes down a little bit, but then it gets really hot again. And I anticipate it's going to happen again. So I do get that they're just trying to put provisions in place. Our regulators and our association, after consultation, came out and we provided a white paper to the BCFSA. Now, the BCFSA is a regulator of ours, but they're controlled by the government. So excuse me, when I say BCFSA, I'm not, accusing them of anything. They're not doing anything wrong. They're trying their best here. But they've been given, as I call it, legislation that just doesn't make sense because they didn't confer with us. And so we told them, why don't we do a pre-offer period, right? Let's have 5 days where you can't sell the property in those first 5 days, and you have to guarantee certain access, and you can't sell it till certain information has been given to the buyers. And then once everybody has, deemed to have the information that they need, we take offers at a certain time. That is consumer protection. Letting people drop away is not protecting the seller.
Yeah, and I also think it's also worth
this whole thing.
Yeah, and also worth noting on that too is if you find yourself with this in place, if you find yourself in a competing situation, I would still be very much compelled to have my clients do as much as possible due diligence beforehand before they make the offer, because during that 3-day rescission period, unless the seller agrees, you're not going to have access to the property. So to maybe do an inspection or get an appraisal and then be like, okay, I'm going to rescind, right? So it is, and I can appreciate the reason for the penalty, which, well, my assumption is that in a competitive market with tons of properties tons of buyers, you don't want people offering on more than one property at a time. And every offer should be made in good faith, but perhaps if there was a penalty, then people would be less reluctant to do that. Who knows? So I can kind of understand it, but it's like, like you're saying, this is consumer protection, but then there's a penalty. So you're penalized for exercising your right, which is a little bit bizarre. But the fact of the matter is, and as you said in one of our sales meetings, right? Like, this is law and you can't contract out of it. So you can't, a seller or a buyer cannot say, hey, we're going to waive our right to the rescission. You just can't do that, right? So this is this is going to be in place, and people need to understand how to count, especially.
And rescission can't be greater than 0.25% as a penalty either. And so one thing we assumed in our industry is that people might just offer non-refundable deposits of a higher amount,
right,
and say that that's non-refundable. Therefore, if I rescind, but they actually wrote into the legislation that rescission's rescission, and it's
right.
0.25%. It's not more than that. And so you could still do a non-refundable deposit, but it's going to be harder to get legally. And again, we're just causing chaos here. Everything. So why are we just putting things into place to cause penalties or to get people to back out, when what we really should be doing is analyzing the industry together, which we did. Like, I was in so many meetings with all our regulators, BCRA, everybody's trying their best here in the industry, but they're not really taking our advice. And unfortunately, they're making legislation that's not written correctly or clearly. I shouldn't say correctly. I should say it's not clear enough in certain regards. And I don't think they're taking into effect the whole thing. Now, let's just make this point too, Glenn. Rescission period runs along with subject period. So what we're going to see in a slower market is people are just going to have subjects of 3-4 days. And if you don't remove subjects, there's no penalty, which it was the case before.
Yeah. So so obviously, that's worth making clear too. So this 3-day rescission period is outside of any terms and conditions you may have.
That's right.
So if you do have 7 days for financing, inspection, if it's a strata title property review document, so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, if you did decide early on, like, I don't know, maybe this one isn't for me, of course you're going to let the rescission period lapse, and then you just won't remove subjects. Because
or you can just not remove subjects during that time. I mean, if you're not removing subjects, you're not removing subjects. They're a completely different animal when it comes to what we're dealing with. Rescission and subjects are different. And so, best advice we could give to a consumer would be just to make sure you have subjects in your deal. Because we're in a slower market now. We're not seeing as many multiple offers, but this will become an issue in a competitive marketplace. And when it gets competitive again, you got to know that people are gonna, try their best to make their offer and their situation better than everybody else's, because it's a competitive.
I'm nearly convinced that we're gonna see, if we, when we see that market again, who knows when it'll be, but when we see that market again, I'm convinced that I'm gonna be getting offers being like, hey, we're just gonna waive that rescission.
Oh yeah,
I'm convinced. But also probably worth noting some exemptions to this too. So residential property on leased land, property sold at auction and proper auction, not multiple offer situations, court-ordered sales as well. Any assignments of contracts. So if somebody's selling their rights to a contract to you, this won't apply. And then, of course, new construction already has their 7-day built in. Exactly. So there are some exclusions, not for every property.
Yeah. So I don't understand the leasehold part, because there's leasehold properties in UBC and SFU, and there's there's native lands that are leasehold and so on, but they're residential properties. I mean, people are buying these to live in. So I'm not 100% sure what the purpose of the leasehold being exempt, but all we need to worry about is that it is exempt, and making sure that people, when they're coming into a transaction. So the best piece of advice we can give to the real estate community is make sure your clients know the situation. Even if it's as clear as mud, we want them to know what the situation is so that there's no surprises. That's the best job we can do to protect them. So if you're going and looking at a leasehold property, have the conversation with your client prior to. If you're selling a leasehold property, have the conversation prior to, and make sure all advisors in the situation, in the transaction, are informed correctly, and that we all have the same information, because that's the other problem that we have, is how the communication, it's very disconnected. We've got BCFSA, who controls the province. We got CREA, which is nationwide. That's going to be when we talk about the foreign buyers ban, they're kind of regulating that. And then, of course, we have our local boards, the Board of Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, pardon me. I've been doing a lot of talking on this over the last little while, as you can imagine. Please excuse my little. But we have all these different organizations, and they're all trying to help give information to us, okay? But it's all over the place, and it's sort of like, where can we all just go to get one definite answer to our questions? If legal advice is the reason, or is the advice we should be giving, why can't we just get legal advice from our regulators? But of course, the way everything's being written, makes things a little bit more difficult, and it puts kind of realtors and the consumers at the most risk, ironically, and that's not what we're trying to achieve. So anyway, just having the clearest understanding you can of these rules and making sure that you're paying attention, talking about it at the beginning of a transaction. Make sure your buyers know before they even go out and look at properties what their rights are, and make sure any seller that is selling a property starting January 3rd, when this comes into effect, that they fully understand. And all our forms have been changed. All our everything accounts for this now. But people don't. There's not a lot of information out there. A lot of people think the market's just gone colder. Inflation's gone up. Interest rates gone up. Everything's kind of slowed everything down. As we say, we're in a stalemate here in Vancouver. You know, buyers and sellers are both just waiting to see what happens. So we're not paying a lot of attention to this, and I don't hear it in the media. I don't hear anybody talking about it except for in our industry. So education from us to our consumer is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's move along then. So let's go to the federal level here. Okay, so exactly what you just mentioned. I've been sort of having a few chats about this as well. So the foreign buyer ban. So as of January 1st, 2023, non-Canadians will be prohibited from buying residential real estate in Canada for 2 years. You know, of course, this is the government saying this is in an effort to improve affordability for Canadians. There are exemptions, as always. I'm not really going to get into them too much because, as Andrew, you and I had already chatted about, some of these things are unclear. You know, like rec properties and cottages, so those are to be exempt. Depending on how long.
It depends on where they are, Glenn. To be honest with you, it's not about what the type of property is. It's about where it is what we figured out. So yeah, I just want to put that. So this was announced at the federal budget level that they were going to put a 2-year foreign buyers ban. I know for a fact, again, that our regulators, our business, has been trying to reach out to the government to get clarity on this. And we got our clarity on December 21st when they just put a big announcement out trying to give us the guidelines to who's going to be included in this. And if I'm being perfectly honest, once again, I'm a little bothered by the fact that this, like you said, there's things that are unclear. This is a law. This is legislation. How can it be unclear? You've had all year to figure it out. Why are we just doing this right now? And the intent was because of this heated market and prices going up. But all data across this entire country right now, pretty much around the world, says that real estate has slowed down. Interest rates have gone up. I think we've already solved this problem temporarily, maybe, but I don't think a foreign buyers ban really will have much effect. And we'll get into that in a second. But the clarity of how they've made it, they haven't given us enough clarity to really understand. So let me try to explain it, okay? The best that I can explain it is that there's two areas that they've acknowledged, that, and they're called the census metropolitan and the census oh my God, I'm not even going to be able to say it. Agglomeration. Do you know how to say that? Agglomeration. That sounds correct. Sorry, guys. I'm learning new vocabulary as we speak. Anyway, those are population areas. That's how that's determined. So census obviously monitors, you know, stats within Canada, where people live, and so on and so forth. And so basically, these areas are areas that are 10,000 plus in population. But when I look at the list that we found, you know, I don't know if that has been updated. Some of the information's old, but I did share a map that I was able to find. The fact that we had to find this map, and through our regular, again, I want to just give credit to a lot of people out there that are working really hard right now, just before Christmas, trying to help us figure this out. So just a shout out to everybody who is working really hard at trying to get these things. Unfortunately, the government, the way that they've written it down, they just say that anything outside of those areas, people can still purchase. Okay, so if you think about the size of our country, and you think about all these little like hubs, you know, major cities obviously notwithstanding, but the little towns, right? So Whistler and Pemberton are not included in this. Squamish is, okay? But if you go up north, like Williams Lake is included, but 100 Mile, Clinton, all those areas down that way, not included, okay? So that means that there is still a lot of property, a lot of land that foreign buyers now will be able to come into the country. And if I'm looking at that correctly, I would say that that is actually going to create more of a problem than just saying you can't, because now we're going into these small communities. Okay, take a small town, and we get people buying real estate in these small towns because they can't buy anywhere else just to get into the Canadian market. Maybe they're trying to get their residency and so on and so forth, right? What's it going to do to the small markets? Like, we're trying to have affordability here. Like, this doesn't make any sense, you know?
Yeah, again, this kind of like falls in that category for me of the rescission period, where maybe when it was happening it might have been useful, but even this, like, even going back, like, to 2016, when the additional property transfer tax came about at 15%, and I think in 2018 it was bumped up to 20%. I mean, it's 20% now, but I believe it was bumped up in 2018. Even back then, when the prices were going up as much as they were, a lot of blame was put towards foreign buyers. So I guess the government tried to do something. Hey, we're trying to do something. But even then, and more so now, foreign buyers make up such a small percentage. So adding this into an already 20% additional tax, I don't think it's going to move the needle at all. It's, again, the government saying this to help improve affordability. I think it's more of a, I don't know, headline grab. I just don't think it's going to move the needle. I don't think it's going to help affordability at all. I think if somebody was out there, I mean, all these changes, right, cause people to pause and kind of ask themselves, how is this going to affect the market? And certain things create a little uncertainty. So when buyers are uncertain, they tend to pull back. So I think if anybody is out there that feels now's the right time for them to make a move, I don't think you need to sit on the fence wondering how this might impact things, because it's not going to, in my opinion.
Yeah, and in the last 2 years, if we look at stats, I mean, since COVID, we haven't had a rash of international buyers, that's for sure. Let's go back for a second. You made a really interesting comment about like why taxes were increased and stuff back in 2018. Well, 2016 was a real peak year for us, okay? And yes, I can tell you personally from being in the marketplace, you do deal with foreign buyers quite a bit in this city. This is Canada. Like, we are a destination for people, immigration, trying to come here. We're safe. We're beautiful. Our climate's good. Maybe not today. That's why we're both at home. But generally, this is a desirable place to live. And how you grow countries is by bringing people from different places, different educations, different backgrounds, and so on and so forth. And you bring them into your country because they're the future of the country. They're the people that come into the country and then they have kids here and the kids grow up in your country. How many of us are kids of immigrants? Right? Like, where our parents came from somewhere else and gave us this beautiful life that we have in our country because of the fact that they made the change to come over here. And so, yes, in 2016, I do suggest that there was a lot more foreign buyers, but I met a lot of these people, Glenn. Like, I met them personally. They were not buying because they were trying to flip homes. They weren't buying because they wanted to leave it vacant. They were buying it because they wanted their family to move here. I remember this great line that I heard from one gentleman who was buying a house for his daughter. Okay, no problem. I mean, he had the means to do so, and I can see the argument where that can help increase prices because, of course, he has the means to be able to just buy a house for his daughter in Vancouver. But why he was buying the house for his daughter was because of the living situation. The fact that he said to me, this quote unquote, I could go to Granville Island and buy fresh fish for my daughter, and she can have produce and fish and all this other things. And where he was coming from, they didn't have that. So he was trying to create a better life. Like, why is this an issue? You could do more with the taxes we're getting from people coming from another country. Let's allocate those taxes to a place of trying to build more homes, because the real problem here is supply. There's no supply. Vancouver in particular, we'll just use us as our marketplace. We've got mountains, ocean, border behind us, and then a valley. There's no real estate here. So we have to go up, but it's very difficult to go up. And cost has made it hard for developers. And developers need to be making profits in order to be building homes. Why else would they do it? And if they don't expect developers to make profit, then the government needs to step in and they need to subsidize these things. Maybe they could subsidize it with the taxes they're getting from the increase in taxes. We also have vacancy tax, speculation tax. I mean, we've got empty homes tax. These are all taxes that are supposed to bring money into our economy by these people that are coming in. I think that's a way better form of trying to build our country to help affordability. But notwithstanding, this is in front of us. Okay.
Right.
So I just make that preach because I just want to make it very clear that I think there's a lot of negativity towards who foreign buyers are. I look at foreign buyers and I think, oh my gosh, those people are going to be bringing their knowledge, their wealth, their families, everybody to this great country of ours. And we should be able to integrate those people because that's what we are as a multicultural society. And it's brilliant. That's what makes Canada great. So I don't like the international sort of image this lays on us. Especially,
I know what it does. I know there is that sort of darker sort of undertone about it too. And that's why I think, given that there's already the additional transfer tax, and look at what's happened to the market since COVID. So what's this going to do? Like this, anyways. It's not going to do anything. So
I don't think it's going to do anything market wise. I don't think it's to do anything price wise. There's just not enough inventory out there anyway. And then the rural markets that maybe haven't felt the ups and downs like we have, just because they're more remote and they're a little bit more specific to buyers. Maybe we'll start seeing, people trying to buy homes in these areas just so that they can get into Canada and have somewhere to live. And
I know, and that's a good point too. I mean, and even it's a good point about the smaller communities too. But I mean, even Whistler right now, I mean, that's an expensive place, right? So not to say, foreign buyers are all going to flock there. I mean, but anyways, impact on the market, pretty nil.
Pretty nil. The other issue that you touched on, Glenn, just with the legislation is, like I said, they waited till December 21st to try to give us clarity, and the clarity wasn't that clear. And so, the problem is when you have unclear legislation and they say that it's going to be up to a judge to decide in the future when there's a problem arises. Well, it's going to take a couple of years for a judge to make any sort of judgment anyway. And so one of the items in there is they talk about, it just sounds kind of funny, but it's something about you could purchase for if it's a rental and you put a tenant in there. I don't think that's what they intended. I think they were trying to say that you can still rent as a foreigner. That's what I think they're trying to say. But it's kind of confusing language, and a lawyer could choose to interpret that however they want, which by being a little bit sloppy with the wording, if that's not what they meant, maybe they did mean that. I don't know, but there's just no clarity coming out, and we're going to just have chaos and confusion, and people are going to do whatever they feel they need to do to help themselves personally, because they're not, they're focused on their own personal lives, right? Anyway, so it's just unfortunate that the government doesn't feel like they can work with us in the industry. There's so many good people in our industry that are trying to do so many good things, and we're smart enough to help them through this and to read these things and maybe go over it and say, this is where I think that we're going to have a bit of a problem. Can you give me some clarity on this? Can you give me clarity on that? And to dump it on us on January 21st before it's supposed to come out in January 1st. And then, CREA and BCREA and all BCFSA, I'm sure all the provinces actually are all probably just clamoring to try to, get some definitions here, and we're not going to have it. And that's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. Regardless of what the policy is, we just want clear understanding so we can do our job well. Our job is to just follow the rules, right? And follow the law. That's what we're supposed to do. And that's what we try to do. It's just, if we don't know exactly how to follow it or the purpose behind it, it makes it difficult to explain to the consumer. That's who we're concerned about, right? I mean, is it about the consumers?
Exactly.
Anyway.
Okay, so let's move on. Just a couple more things here. This one might be a little bit on the quicker one, because I think this one, there's really not much clarity around it either. But the anti-flipping tax, I don't even know if it should be called an anti-flipping tax, more of a anti-flipping rule. So basically, again, the government is trying to curb real estate flipping. So my understanding is that how this came about is house flippers have been using a primary residence exemption to avoid or reduce taxes. So when you sell your primary residence, you're not paying a capital gain. So I guess what people were doing is they'd purchase a property, whether they renovate it or not, but they purchased a property as their principal residence, and then they were selling it within a year, within 12 months. So what
the rule before, Glenn, was that if you held it for a year, then there wasn't capital gains to be paid on it. I will specify this, though: if you becomes a habit that you're doing that,
Right.
then they can come because they can say you're operating a business and that they're going to start charging you capital gains because you're running this like a business. So if somebody just stays in one place for a year and they've got a reasonable reason for why they're moving and they take a profit there and then they buy another property, then they renovate it and 2 years later they sell that home too, I think that you're probably okay there. But if they did it again after that, then the government's going to start noticing it and then capital gains would be applicable. That's before any of these rules. I want to make it really, really clear, though, that this was announced in the budget, just like the home buyers, the foreign buyers ban. And we really haven't had any clarity on it since. It was not brought up in the note that came out on December 21st. It isn't unheard of that things get put into budgets and then they don't necessarily come into play. So I just want to be clear to anybody who watches this. I don't know if this is officially coming into play because I haven't seen that official announcement yet, but I do hear what you're saying. And the idea behind it is that if you hold a property for 1 year, X amount of tax, hold it for 2 years, a little bit less tax. And I think that kind of is on a gradual scale to how long you have to own a property before you can sell it without having to pay an additional tax towards your income tax, like a capital gain of some sort.
Right. Right. And I think
that's the concept.
Yeah, and I think with this one, it's just, for anybody out there that's doing it, just, hey, this is just kind of saying like, hey, there's talk about this. You should be aware of it if you are in the business of flipping properties, whether you're the person that casually flips a couple a year, or it's a hobby type thing, or one a year, or one every few years, or what it might be. You're going to want to know about this. And of course, with all of these items, there are exemptions, and there's a pretty long list of exemptions for this one too. So such as a birth, care of an elderly parent, breakdown of a relationship, that sort of thing. So there are a bunch of exemptions too, but essentially if you plan to flip a home and own it for less than 365 days, expect to pay some taxes. And essentially my understanding is, if this does come about, you just won't be able to use the primary residence exemption. So for most people, ultimately, business as usual. I don't think it's going to impact the market. I mean, of course, anybody that incurs cost tries to pass that cost on to the consumer. But at the same time, when we're talking real estate, you're going to sell the property depending on the market conditions and that price. It's not, you're not gonna be able to pass on every cost to
how many people are we talking about here? Like, let's be real. If I buy a home and I take the risk of buying a home and I live in it through a renovation, I don't know if anybody has lived through a renovation before, like it is your primary residence and you're living there, like that is a pain. And if you can do that well, and then you resell a property for a higher amount because of the improvements that you put into it, I don't see why this is an issue. Like, why are we so against people trying to make money? I get trying to create affordability, but trying to hit people for making money on doing a process and taking a risk, because there is huge risk to that too. Nobody knows when the markets change. Like I said, we're always trying to protect one side or the other. And what we should be doing is trying to find policies that protect everybody, buyers, sellers, tenants, landlords, everybody in our country. I mean, that's what we need to be doing. And I think that the anti-flipping tax, it's just another sort of grab at more money, but it's a small percentage. I mean, how many people do you know who regularly are moving into homes to flip them purposely?
Yeah, exactly.
Not many. Not many.
I don't. And the other on the
maybe on HGTV, we see it a lot on HGTV.
I mean, another part of it too is most of the people that I work with, they either don't have the capital or the stomach to carry out a renovation, right? And capital, not just for the renovation, right? But also, not many people, like you said, want to live through a renovation. So can they afford to say, keep their rental, keep their current residence, pay for that while they do that? Not many people can do that. So part of what I'm thinking is, if we could make it almost easier for people to renovate and flip, then that would give buyers more options to choose from. So now it's just the ones that are renovated, like the ones that need renovation, those ones are getting pushed to the side. And then the majority of buyers are flocking to the renovated ones, and those values are kind of going up. So, but nobody's still buying the unrenovated, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, again, it's like, anyways, I don't
chicken and the egg, man. They're just trying to get a little bit more tax. Now, again, I just want to preface that I have not been given an official anything. At least I would expect my inbox would have had something saying that this is now being implemented. But It's not also from a real estate perspective. Maybe we need to talk to an accountant or somebody that's dealing with taxes more.
Of course.
Expert of some
so
sort.
We'll just keep this one as
let's
just
table that one for a sec as a heads up, because they did announce it. There's no question they announced it. It's just I haven't heard anything since, and they did come out on December 21st to give at least a bulletin on the foreign buyers ban. So I would have suspected a bulletin on that one if that's what they were putting through. But I think the market simmered down a little bit, and so really, frankly, if we just let if we just let actual sort of natural sort of indicators of a market play out, they always play out. Supply, demand, interest rates, all this other sort of stuff. That's how you work this system. You don't do it by creating new rules and new taxes and confusing everybody about what applies and what doesn't apply. The problem for us in the industry is that the list is so long, especially in Vancouver, of all the little things that could or could not happen, and they're all dependent on, well, did you do this or did you do that, or who's involved, and is this person married to that person, and what's this amount of ownership, and did they have a good reason for it? Who gets to decide on the good reason? I mean, that's the thing. How do I get that answer? And then you hit the nail on the head on the other point, which is like, we need to speed things up. And in Vancouver, we've got a new mayor now, and that's one of the things he's focusing on, is trying to speed up the process for development, because supply is the answer. Okay, supply. And that's why I like EB's idea of the rentals, is because what he's doing, whether you like the idea or not, or you're in a strata and you're mad about it, he is creating supply for rentals. That should help naturally by creating an environment that will bring prices down, not by artificially trying to tax them or do this or do that. Because once you take taxes off, could that spur something new? Like, what's going to happen 2 years from now? I was meeting with a client just recently, and I was talking to them about, their property, and they're non-resident, own a property, and they, in Vancouver already, they rent it out. They don't make any money off of it because they just rent it to a friend, but they like to own it. And he's like, should I sell it based on all the stuff that's coming on? I said, you're American. You can't buy anything if you sell it. And who knows what happens 2 years from now when this foreign buyer ban gets lifted and people start buying in the city. I told them to hold on to it. There's no reason not to, And so what I just did there was not add supply to the marketplace by giving advice that this is probably better to wait than it is to sit. And so it kind of backfires.
I agree.
I don't know. And we also got to acknowledge the people that have the money that are creating this so-called problem with, prices going up. That's another issue that we have in society right now, is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and we're not supporting the middle class, right? And if the middle class is being supported a little bit better, and the rich are paying a little bit more into it, but the middle class seems to be who's getting really hit the hardest by all this. People with the money, they got the money anyway. A little bit more money, no big deal. But the people in this middle class, the hardworking professionals, the two-income families that can barely afford a house in Vancouver, that is an affordability issue, and now they're being hit again. And that, to me, doesn't make sense. It's kind of like you're going after the middle working professional that is really the economy is dependent on more than anybody, and then also not supporting the people, most importantly, that need the houses that are at the lower end. And most of those houses are going to be created through rentals. So we need the government to start subsidizing more rentals, which I think they're trying to do, and that is in the budget. And let's give a little credit to the federal government here too. If we look at the budget, the other policies that they put into place that don't necessarily affect us all that much were about building more homes, and they did mention supply. So it's not that they're not aware. I just don't think we need at this level of foreign buyers ban, along with that. And so how do we build more homes in areas that people need them a little bit more efficiently, a little bit quicker, because that's really what we need for affordability more than anything. These policies and changes are just going to confuse the marketplace. Is what's going to happen. And that's the truth.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's wrap things up with
that. I'm having so much fun.
Well,
I love talking about this stuff. No,
I know, and it's great, and it's helped for me. Like, I'm always trying to educate myself, but then that's why I was like, oh, I want to talk to Andrew about this, and let's just get all out there, because anyways, I absolutely love your insight. So I try, and obviously, I mean, it's my job to know what's going on and that sort of thing, but I always like another perspective and definitely
Yeah,
value your
well,
perspective.
let's
So
make that a service announcement right now too, for all realtors out there that are listening to this. Talking, sharing with one another, giving each other the information, making sure that when we find something out, like a lot of people come to me immediately when a problem comes up and or a new policy or whatever, and it's hard for me because I get the information at the same time they do, right? And so a lot of the time I'll get spurred on by, somebody, because we got such a great group of collective people at our company that I always get a message whenever somebody finds something they think I should have. And I love it. I appreciate it so much because it spurs me on to go research it further. And then I have access to some really great people, like I said, in our, shout out to BCREA and all those people that I can call on. And they really are, like I said, trying to help. But we're just as confused as everybody else. And so working together and working with lawyers and working with your network and building relationships and supporting one another, but most importantly, making sure we all understand the calls to action, the things we need to do, so that we're not in places where we're trying to get away with something, or we're not in places where we're confused. One party thinks one thing, the other part thinks the other, and then we end up with contractual issues, right? We're going to create so many other arguments and issues and problems unless we're all educating one another appropriately. So please, as a service announcement to all our realtors out there, to all the people in our industry, thanks to those who are sharing, but those who are listening and hearing this for the first time, or somebody who's out there and they're not 100% sure, please reach out to your brokers and your colleagues and get the information right, so that when we are out there helping the consumer, we're all on the same page. We do not need to be arguing with one another over the policies or the changes or the process. We need to figure out what that is, what the process should be, so we can all act appropriately, so we can all be prepared, so that we can all do the right thing together. Correct? We can follow the law. We're not worried about following laws. That's never been a problem. It's just give me a clear vision of what the law is and a clear path and system towards making sure that that happens correctly. And that's where we're lacking right now, is that the government comes up with an idea, they implement it too quickly, they announce it prematurely, and then they don't listen to what we're trying to tell them, because I think they feel as if we're always trying to do something that only benefits our industry. But the only benefit to our industry is if we're actually protecting the consumer, right? I mean, that's our job. It's to support our clients and buy loyalty. And so when your client comes to you and puts you in a position that says, I want to do this, and we don't have a direct law that we can point to that's very clear that says you can't do that, as an agent, what do you have to do? And that is really, really, really tricky, and it really puts a lot of us at risk. The answer is tell them to talk to their lawyer, get the legal advice, follow the legal advice that your client is giving you, because you have agency to the client and you have a loyalty and a fiduciary duty to that client to follow the legal advice that they are giving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's going to be confusing.
What's that?
I said it's going to be confusing though.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of in part why I wanted to do this, because it just seems like, and maybe we'll just touch on the market real quick, even though we could probably talk about it for hours because of everything that's going on. But that's sort of where like this kind of came about for me. I was like, I mean, I'd be getting emails. I'm like, this legislation, that legislation. I mean, there's so much. So I can only imagine that people out there with the rise in interest rates, obviously prices have come down because of that, and maybe we'll talk about that in a second, but there seems so much going on. And then so anybody that's out there as a consumer that's like, well, what does that mean? Like, how's that going to impact the market? Like, holy smokes, what do I got to worry about now? It just seems like a lot. So that's kind of why I wanted to, get on there and kind of just put things out in this manner. And, I've done little individual videos on them and that sort of thing, but I found this discussion a little bit more valuable than those. So, I mean, the market right now too, where, in a very short period of time, interest rates have gone up, 4%, right? But with that, prices have come down. So, I don't know, as though, I think people are always wondering, is now a good time? Is now a bad time? Right. And sort of the way sort of, Brittany and I kind of come at things are, we just want to help people make smart decisions for themselves. Right. And, if somebody, so for right now, and one of the mortgage brokers that we work with, he's done a couple of these comparisons on interest rates and prices and down payment. and mortgage payment, right? So, maybe when rates were up 2 and a bit percent, $1 million property, you put this much down, then now that property is worth 800 or 850, so your down payment's less, but your mortgage payment per month was a little bit more, but the property was down quite a bit. The purchase price was down. And then now in a lot of areas, it's kind of similar, like that payment, but the mortgage payment, but you're putting less cash into the down payment. So then the whole conversation becomes like, everybody was so willing to compete for properties. And I think it was more so like everyone was just uber focused on the rate, and then they'll pay whatever they could to get the property. Whereas on the flip side, now we got the higher rates, the lower prices, and now people are nervous, right? So
we're in a state of confusion, Glenn. That's where
and
we're
then
at
so
right
you
now.
add all these things into it. It's just like
I'm going to give you a piece of advice that I think you and Britt would already, offer, but I'll say it out loud on here. And I'll say this: everybody's in a different situation. So if you've got somebody, or if somebody's curious about that, call Glenn and Brittany, talk to them about your personal situation. Okay. Don't worry about the market. Don't worry about the area. Don't worry about anything first. First things first, worry about you. What can you afford? Where do you need to be? What do you need to do to support your family? What schools are important to you? What are the main basis of what you're trying to accomplish? Are you in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 kids right now and you need to move up? It's actually a great time to do so, because the prices haven't actually come down all that much. Vancouver, I'd like anybody on this call that listens to this call, go look at the last 25 years of real estate in Vancouver, okay? And I promise you, it goes like this, and then it dips like that, and then it goes like this, and then it dips like that, and then it goes like this. And those little bits that make it dip are usually just the times of confusion. Foreign buyer tax came into Vancouver. That was the biggest dip we had seen in a very long time, which was in 2017 or something like that. I don't have the chart in front of me. But when it went down in price, it went down in price because of the speculative decision that people believed was going to affect our marketplace. As soon as people felt comfortable with the fact that it really wasn't or it came down enough, or it didn't have that big of an effect, it mostly affected the higher end homes. Like I said, the people who could afford to buy that stuff were the ones that were getting, pushed away, but they were pushed away because it was 20%. And as soon as the correction was almost 20%, which I think it was 16 at the time, in the higher end market during that time, it came down 16%. It was close to even again, right? Market hit back up again. That's
I don't think even with things like that, like I don't think demand ever really goes away around here, but things happen, legislations come in, and then it makes people pause. And then,
that's what I'm saying. It's confusion, right? It's
I don't know what to do with this. Exactly. When buyers are confused, they pull back. So it's kind of one of those things where there's still people that want to make the move. So wasn't because this legislation worked, but it caused confusion, and I wonder what this can do to the market. So people say, hey, maybe we should just wait. And then of course, people do have to buy and sell at any point of the year, regardless of what's going on. And, in order to sell, prices had to come down a little bit. And then it got to a point, of course, where, oh boy, this looks good. And then
everybody at once, at once. And that's what happens.
So I guess all I'm saying is right now, to echo your point, everyone's got to look at their own individual situation, and that's going to differ from one person to the next. Moving forward, as far as the interest rates go, those are predictions. We were told a while ago that, hey, everything's okay, rates are going to stay low for a while, and they didn't, right? Or not as long as we were kind of told, right? Mm-hmm. So they're predictions. I think people also are losing sight of the fact that real estate's a long-term investment. But where I do see, where I do see a smart move, if you've got, secure job, and if you've got the capital, focusing more on the purchase price as opposed to the rate, because the rates will come down. And when the rates do come down, typically prices will go back up. Maybe they won't shoot back up, but you're better to be on this side of it. So the gain is going to be in the equity, in the value of the property, and then you can refinance and get that lower rate. So ultimately, though, don't try and play the game, do what's best for you. In the long run, because real estate's a long-term investment, you're going to be okay. And I feel people have lost sight of that because there's been so many people that have made wonderful short-term gains. So it's hard to lose sight of that, right? So at the end of the day, guys, I guess what Andrew and I are saying here is there's a lot going on. There's a lot of confusion. So we're here to help put things down, talk about them, and see what makes sense for yourselves, right?
Yeah.
So don't go at it alone. Don't
I was just going to say that, Glenn. I was just coming out and I was just going to say, if everybody's listening to us really clearly here, go find somebody you trust in the business that has information that they need, that understands the market, that has good relationships with other realtors. You know, like somebody who's in the know right now is somebody that you need to be talking to. So really, as a consumer, you should be asking a lot more questions of your realtor, like how they get their information, who they're supported by, so on and so forth, making sure that they've got credibility towards the information that they're getting. They know how to direct you and put you in touch with the right accountants or the right lawyers or the right people that were fully informing you, and so on and so forth. And then in return, that agent or that advisor should be asking you a lot of personal questions. And if you can't share that information or don't want to share that information, you're not doing yourself any justice, because the best advice I can give anybody is find somebody you can trust and you share all information with, so that you make sure you are getting the advice that pertains to your situation. When I bought a house back in 2007, I think it was, you know, the 2008 market crash happened, and I was like, oh my God. But you know what? I was in a house with my family in a great location. They were young kids. Everything was good. Like, and you know what? Holding on and waiting through that turned out to be a pretty good, you know, situation. Right now, like, we are actually experiencing something not from the policies, but from a feeling of the consumer, very similar to 2008. When the market crash happened, mostly affected the United States from a financial perspective, but it affected the whole world from a eyes-on perspective, like scared of real estate and what could happen. And so everybody paused. Everybody said, I'm not going to do anything right now. And we all sat on the fence. It was like a big stalemate. And if you look at our stats right now, we're in a big stalemate. Listings and sales have both come down together, like new listings and sales. Right. Okay, if that's happening, that means we have no difference in our absorption rates or our supply and demand and all sorts of stuff. So what happens in the new year? Well, in 2009, I can tell you that the first chance of any sort of good news, I always say, I think the good news in Canada was Obama getting in and being inaugurated. Why that affected us in Vancouver, I think we were just looking for an excuse to buy again. And I think that that's what people are looking for right now. As soon as they see an excuse to buy again, everybody might rush in together. And that's what happened in 2009, is we saw a huge increase in the spring of 2009. Now, I think we're dealing with different financial metrics. I think we're dealing with different policies and changes that I don't believe are going to create this big, you know, shoot up. But be ready for the market to turn. And when it does turn, buyers tend to work together. They're just looking for the comfort of somebody else doing it. So instead of worrying about everybody else, worry about yourself. And that's kind of talk to a realtor that can help you through your situation, because there's good opportunities out there right now. And for some people, it's a good time not to do anything. You know, it's like I just told you, I gave advice to the person who had a listing. I said, don't do anything. Why do you need to do anything? Let's wait and see what happens. There's other people that I may have given completely different advice to, not because of the market, but because of their personal situation. That's the thing. Did I just yell at the camera?
And the difficult thing is,
sorry.
You know, the difficult thing is too, and this is sort of why I said don't try and play the game of timing it, right? I mean, we know when the bottom of the market is, when it's already gone back up, and then we look over our shoulder and we're like, shit, I should have done that back then, right? And again, I'm not giving advice to anybody, right? But you know, I'm just saying it's you're right. Buyers like doing things together. But you know, I just can't encourage people enough just to speak with somebody, find a realtor you trust, ask a friend for a referral, blah, 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 to see what sort of makes sense, right? Don't just follow the herd. And this is long-term. And to your point, there's no time that's too early to engage with a realtor to get ready. Like if you were going to buy, you said, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to be ready in 2024, spring 2024. Let's talk. Let's develop that relationship. Use that realtor as a resource. But when you start going out and looking at open houses, like it's not too late. I mean, it's never too late, but things can escalate quickly. And I think people find something they are ready to buy sooner than they anticipate. So just to anybody out there, just engage with somebody regardless of when you're planning on buying, and just develop that relationship. Maybe you have to interview a few, right? But anyway, so be prepared. To Andrew's point, be uber prepared, especially with your financing. Get your mortgage broker, your bank, all the documents.
Get your team ready, you know, like you've got a team, you know,
ready.
you got to have a realtor, you got to have your mortgage broker, your realtors usually help you through that stuff and can give you examples, but you got to have a team, you got to be prepared, you got to get into it. It's just like anything you do in life. If the more prepared you are, the more you study for it, the more prepared you're going to be to do well on it. I mean, and that's just the way it goes. And so,
and then there's
there's a good opportunity to do really well in this market. I was going to say, Glenn, the other question is that if somebody thinks the market's going to go down further, what do we ask them? How much do you want it to go down, or how much do you think it's going to go down? Because you made the comment about chasing a market upwards. Find where you think it's going to go and make an educated guess based on all the best information that you can find. Buy at the lowest point possible. It still might go down a little bit further than what you thought. That's okay, but you got a little bit of a discount. You know, right, 5% under whatever the asking price is, or whatever the last highest sale was. That's a better way of going about it. Look at the sales in the area. Don't look at the list price. Look at the sales in the area, and then base a little bit of a correction off of that. That's what the banks are doing, you know. And then you get a property at a lower amount, and then you're going to be waiting it out through the increase. Trust me.
Exactly.
Because it's a better buying environment right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where I think the smart buyers, regardless of the market, you kind of need to make your offer on where you think the market's going. So even when it was really competitive, and you're like, well, that one just sold for $800,000. Let's just offer that. Well, no. Yeah, let's talk about what's happening and where things are going, and let's get it there, right? And same thing conversely right now. You know, like I think we've probably seen the biggest drop, but things could still come down a little bit more. So then where are you making your offer? And again, there's some advice for some buyers, but also some preempting for some sellers out there. Like, look, there's going to be some buyers who are out there right now. They're going to take some swings. They're going to take some cuts, right? Fine. So let's just find out what that number is that makes sense to the seller, so they can get on with their plans and see if there's a deal in there somewhere, right?
Managing expectations, Glenn. That's what this is all about. It's all about us just making sure that the information is being given to the consumer so that they can make good personal decisions for themselves, you know? And that's the truth. And that's how we get through markets like this. And so we can take every policy that they want to give us and we'll work with them. But at the end of the day, why you buy or sell a property is your own personal situation. Just like the foreign buyers I was saying, like, let's look at why they were buying here. They were buying here to move here, to grow their families here, to invest here, to maybe start businesses here. Why are we telling them not to come? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's how our country was built. Instead, let's focus on how we can make sure that there's more property and more ability and better education. And I don't know. It's just like, I think we're focusing on the wrong things right now, but we deal with what we can. As a consumer who's watching this, just make sure you're working with somebody that is thinking about everything, you know? That's the key. Exactly. It's the key. Don't miss it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Andrew, why don't we just end on that note? So thank you sincerely.
No, that was awesome.
Thank you so much for doing this with me.
I'll give you a line that I've been hearing from a lot of people, and I don't know if I love it or not, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, which is you date the rate, but you marry the house. So, you know, don't worry about the interest rates all that much. If you can afford them now, chances are we're kind of getting closer to the peak of where that top interest rate will be. And but the house is yours forever, and we can always kind of readjust interest rates and so on and so forth. So just look at your personal situation, and if you're ready to either buy or sell, Vancouverites are stubborn. They're not going to give away their gold. You know, like gold doesn't go down in value during bad markets. It goes up in value, and in Vancouver in particular, I think we've got real estate gold. So don't expect it to get too cheap.
Okay, buddy. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you, Glenn. Have a good day, buddy. Take care.
Cheers.
Merry Christmas. Bye.